In this video, I'm going to explain what the field of organizational behavior is about. And as well, I'm going to tell you why it's extremely important if you want to thrive at work, or if you want to thrive in your relationships. It's very important to have a good understanding of organizational behavior. Organizational behavior is basically trying to understand human nature, trying to understand why people act and react the way they do. And the basic point here is that if you understand human nature very well, you'll be very successful at interacting with others. You'll be very successful at working in teams. You'll be very successful in your relationships. That's why I probably don't exaggerate if I say that organizational behavior is probably the most important module you are going to take. In order to explain or to present organizational behavior, we first are going to talk about the importance of interpersonal skills in the workplace. Why is it important to have interpersonal skills when you are working in a team, when you're working in a company? Okay? Then I'm going to explain or define what organizational behavior is about. And to actually show as well that organizational behavior, what we know about human nature, is actually based on systematic study. It's actually based on experimentation. So in this context, organizational behavior is a science, not very different from chemistry or physics. Then we're going to talk about the different disciplines that actually contribute to organizational behavior. Because organizational behavior, what it does is to actually look at psychology and other disciplines to try to understand what part of that knowledge is actually useful to increase, to make it better, your interpersonal skills. Then we're going to talk about how organizational behavior, there are not a lot of general truth. So there's not a lot of absolutes in organizational behavior. Also, we're going to identify the challenges of organizational behavior. What are the main problems we face when we do research on organizational behavior? What are the main problems we want to resolve by understanding organizational behavior? Okay, so let me start by asking you a very simple question. I want you to think about the worst problem you ever had at work. Just for 1 second. I want you to stop and think about that situation. And I want you to think about why the situation was so bad. Now, I've been asking this question in every single class I've done on this topic. Normally, when I do this face-to-face, I would ask the students to write down on a piece of paper a small, quick description of the worst problem they encounter in the workplace. Then I would take all the piece of paper and I would actually read them, some of them. And every time I've done it, and I've done this many times, every time I open one of those pieces of papers, I always find the same kind of problems. People tell me about how their supervisor didn't listen to them, how they weren't getting paid the money they deserved. They talked about how some colleague wasn't nice to them, or how they were fighting in their team, or how they were motivated to go to work. So what I'm trying to say with this is that these kind of problems, are the problems that organizational behavior can actually deal with. These problems are going to become less important if you understand organizational behavior. These problems, fighting with your supervisor, not being motivated to go to work, etc., are caused by a lack of understanding of human nature. Now, why are we talking about feeling good or feeling bad in the workplace? Well, the reason is very simple. How you feel is going to affect your performance. How the people in your team feels is going to affect how they actually perform in the team, how they interact with each other. Therefore, nowadays, a lot of companies take this very seriously. A lot of companies want to be experts in organizational behavior because they want to make sure that their employees actually feel good so that they perform very well. I normally say, as a joke, that I always teach thinking that my students are psychopaths. The reason I'm saying this is that the point I'm going to be making here is that you should treat people well in the workplace. You should treat people well in your team, not only because it's the right or the moral or the ethical thing to do, but also because by treating them well, they're going to perform better. They're going to be better at the work. So even if you don't care about people and you only care about yourself, taking care of others is good for you. That's why great companies like Google, they understand this very well. That's why they treat their employees very well. Why? Because they understand that if you feel good with yourself, if you go to work happy, you're going to be more motivated, you're going to innovate more, you're going to work harder. Therefore, the performance is going to be better. So this relationship between how you feel, feeling good, and performance is extremely important. And we're going to talk a lot about this relationship in this course. So you have two examples here. Two examples are not actually obvious because a lot of people think about Google, Facebook, companies like that. But these two companies, the one on the left, I don't know if you have ever heard of that company, but that company is called Wegmans. And it's a chain of supermarkets in the States. Now, Fortune magazine every year conducts a survey to identify which are the best places to work for. And Wegmans, which is just a supermarket, always ranks very high. Let me show you now in the website in Fortune, I'll show you now the results for the survey. So here you have the results of the survey conducted at Wegmans. And you can see that 93% of employees in Wegmans actually say that that is a great place to work. 93%. That's an extremely, extremely high number. I mean, if you compare that with a typical company, the average is 59%. This company, Wegmans, has 93%. And the reason why the number is so much higher is because they have a good understanding of organizational behavior principles and they apply those principles correctly because they understand that higher financial performance, higher performance in their teams is related to people feeling well. Now you have more numbers here below. 96% of people who work in Wegmans believe that they're given the resources and equipment they need to do their job. So things like this are going to affect how you feel in the workplace. So what they're trying to understand is human nature, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad, and create a working environment that allows you to bring out the best of you, that actually allows you to be the best version of yourself. Now, understanding organizational behavior, it's actually important and leads to better performance because it's going to provide to you and to the people who work in that team or in that company with interpersonal skills. So organizational behavior is about that. It's about understanding human nature so you gain interpersonal skills. And developing these interpersonal skills in managers is going to improve the quality of the relationships. It's going to improve the satisfaction, the job satisfaction of those working in that company or in that team. And then on top of that, if you are a great place to work, you are going to have more applicants for the jobs you advertise. Everybody's going to want to actually work in your team, in your company. That's why companies like Google, they get hundreds, thousands of applicants, sometimes for one job. And when you have a big pool of candidates, it's going to be easier for you to choose the right candidate. That's why organizational behavior, understanding the principle of human nature, lead to better interpersonal skills. So we are actually saying that understanding organizational behavior, being very good at organizational behavior is important because it actually leads to having interpersonal skills. So, but what is exactly the field of organizational behavior? So the main objective of organizational behavior is to use different research, different knowledge we have about human nature. Is to understand what are the drivers of human nature. So here on the right, you have a diagram that is going to become more and more complex as we go through the module. And in this diagram, we have at the right performance. And performance in your team, performance in your company. And the main hypothesis here, the main point here is that behavior leads to performance. The performance of a team, the performance of a company depends on the behavior of those working in that team. Therefore, for organizational behavior, it's extremely important that we understand the different factors that lead to human behavior. What makes you act and react the way you do? At the moment, I have X, Y, and Z, different factors. But later on, as we go through the module, we'll be giving names to these factors. And the idea is very simple. If you understand what drives human behavior, then you have a better chance of creating an environment that somehow controls those factors that lead to behavior so that you can actually modify, change the behavior of those who work in your team and therefore obtain better performance. This is what companies like Google, Wegmans do. They understand the factors that lead to behavior. They create circumstances, situations, rules that are actually going to control, are going to change those factors so that you behave in a certain way. This will become clear as we go through the course. But at the moment, I just want you to have this idea. This is what organizational behavior is about. It's about understanding, looking at what drives human behavior to improve the performance of your team or your organization. So we have been saying that the main objective of organizational behavior is to understand the factors, the drivers that explain human behavior. So that if we understand those factors, we can control them, we can change them, so that we can change behavior and therefore obtain better performance. But how do we go about this? How do we get to understand or try to understand the drivers of human behavior? So we do it in the same way that we do it in other scientific disciplines. We conduct systematic study. So for example, one of the main topics in organizational behavior is motivation. We're going to have a full chapter on this issue. And then we all have intuitions about what motivates you and what doesn't. For example, money. Is money a good motivator? Normally when I ask this question in the class, some people think that money is a good motivator. Other people think that it's not. And other people think that it depends. So we all have intuitions about this relationship, the relationship between money and your behavior. But your intuition about something can be right, but a lot of the times our intuitions are wrong. That's why we conduct experiments. That's why we conduct research to really try to understand the relationship between money and motivation. And that's what we have here in the bottom of this slide, systematic study. And it's just like anything else. We assume that behavior is not random. There is a reason why you do the things you do. And then there are some laws, some regularities behind that. And that by conducting research, we can understand those regularities and therefore become better at predicting, changing, modifying human behavior. But what is systematic study? Here I give you an example here in that little box. And that is an example of an experiment that was conducted in order to understand motivation. What motivates people to work? In this case, the experiment took place in a call center, in a place where they actually were calling people to raise funds for students. So what they did is the following thing. They got those students who benefited from the money being raised, they made them visit those making the phone calls. And then they found out that those who were making the phone calls who met the students actually raised more money than those who didn't meet the students. Meaning that a way of motivating people to do something is to show them the benefit of the work. So now there's a lot of experiments like this. So now we are pretty sure that that is a fact about human behavior. If you understand what the benefits of your actions are, if you understand how the money you're raising is affecting, improving the lives of those who are going to benefit from the money, you're going to be more motivated to do it, and therefore you are going to raise more money. And this knowledge is extremely useful because now with that knowledge you can design a workplace where workers have access to understanding the impact that the work have, and therefore the motivation is going to go up. So this is just one example. There's millions of these experiments, and that's how we are building this understanding of human nature and human behavior. So we're looking at relationships here. We're looking at a relationship between meeting those who benefit from your work and your motivation and performance. And we're trying to understand what are the causes, what are the effects. It's like any other scientific discipline. And then we have conclusions that are evidence-based. And then we use those conclusions to create a work environment that is going to lead to better behavior and therefore to better performance. And like in any other scientific field, the data is gathered, collected in a controlled way. So we follow the same principles of any scientific inquiry. The point is, we have these systematic studies that is actually allowing us to understand what drives human behavior. And that information, that knowledge is there available for everyone. So the point is that if you become a manager, or even if you work in a team, your decisions, what you do, how you organize different aspects of the workplace, how you organize your team, how you hire new team members, anything you do in a team, in an organization, should be evidence-based. Because that is what great places to work do. That's what Wegmans do, that's what Google's do. They look at the best available research on human behavior, and then they design policies, processes, procedures using that. So it's about forcing managers, decision makers to make decisions not only on their intuition, but to make decisions based on the best evidence that there is out there about human nature. You're gonna hire somebody new, or you're gonna offer a promotion within your team or within your company. How should you do that? A lot of managers nowadays, they just use their own intuition. And then they are surprised when people who don't get the promotion are demotivated. Well, a solution is look at what the research says about motivation and about how to communicate a promotion, for example. How to communicate the outcome of a promotion. How do you talk and tell the people who didn't get the promotion that they didn't? All that knowledge is going to make your decisions more efficient. Therefore, the people affected by your decisions are going to feel better and their performance is not going to be affected. This is what we talk when we say, this is what we do when we say evidence-based management. It's about making decisions based on the best evidence available. Organizational behavior in itself is not a discipline. I mean, organizational behavior is just using different disciplines like psychology, social psychology, sociology, anthropology, using all those fields, their techniques, to think about human behavior in the context of an organization or in the context of a team. So in a way, when we are conducting research on organizational behavior, we're conducting research on psychology, social psychology, etc., but applied to the context of the organization. Now, the knowledge we obtain from conducting systematic study on organizational behavior is actually contingent to the situation, meaning that it depends on the situation. So we don't have like general truth. We don't have absolutes in organizational behavior. Everything depends in the context. So for example, just to give you an example, increasing somebody's salary, is that going to increase their motivation? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. One of them is your previous salary. Imagine an increase in your salary of 20,000 euro a year. Well, if you already make 220,000 euro a year, 20,000 euro more is not really going to increase your happiness, your motivation. But if you only make 25,000 a year, 20,000 more a year is a massive increase that allows you to do a lot more things in your spare time. Therefore, that's going to have a bigger impact on your motivation and your happiness. So again, an increase in salary, does it increase your motivation? It depends. So that's what it is. That's what we mean here when we say that OB concepts are situational. They depend on the situation. And that's why managers need to understand this, that all the findings that we have in organizational behavior are going to depend on the circumstances. So now that we have an understanding of what organizational behavior, maybe we can ask ourselves, what are the challenges of organizational behavior? What are the main problems that organizational behavior is going to address? Well, the first one is to respond to economic pressures. So if you have a good understanding of organizational behavior, if you have a good understanding of human nature, it's going to be a lot easier for you to manage, to navigate economic pressure. So for example, and that can be in both situations, that can be when the economy is really good and when the economy is not good. When the economy is really good, one of the main problems that employers actually face is to find people, good talent, that are going to work for the company. When unemployment is low, it's very difficult to actually get good candidates. That's why if you have great organizational behavior and therefore you create a great place to work, then people are going to want to work for you. Then you're going to have quite a lot of applicants applying for any job you advertise. Like what happens with Google. Even if the economy is doing very well, Google still gets a large number of applicants. But the opposite is true as well. If the economy is not great and you need to reduce people's salary, if you don't want that to affect their behavior and therefore their performance, understanding how to communicate that, how to motivate people when you're decreasing their salary is extremely important as well. I mean, another challenge that we have here nowadays is globalization. If you think about now and 50 years ago, things have become way more global. We are more mixed. We work in more mixed teams with people with different backgrounds. And that's always a challenge as well. So organizational behavior is going to help you understand things like what is the relationship between your culture and how you work. Do people work in different manners depending on where they are from? Is it always like that? So those are challenges that as a manager or as a team player you're going to be facing. Having a good understanding of how culture affects the way people behave is extremely important as well for the performance of your team or the organization. And the challenge of globalization is actually connected to the next challenge, which is diversity. Because the workplace teams has become way more diverse in other respects, like gender, for example. I don't know if you watched this series, Mad Men, but for example, that was a picture of a typical office back in the 60s. And you can see that most of them are white men working there. So the situation has changed. That is not the case anymore. So you having the right understanding of the role that gender, being a woman, being a man, plays in your work, does it really explain important differences? Or is it just a superficial difference? So understanding all that is going to make you as well more successful in the workplace and in your team. We're going to have a full topic, a full chapter on diversity. So we'll be going deeper into this idea here. But what I want to say now is that success as well depends on how you manage diversity in your team, diversity in your workplace. Organizational behavior, we said, is connected to interpersonal skills. And having great interpersonal skills is actually crucial if you want to be good at customer service. And think about it. Customer service nowadays dominates most jobs. Most jobs we do now actually have to deal with customers. So having happy customers, interacting with them in the right way is essential for the performance of any team or any company. And you probably have examples yourself. You've gone to a restaurant and the waiter maybe wasn't as nice and then made the whole experience not as good as it could have been. And that could prevent you from going back to that restaurant again. And that applies to everything. Organizational behavior, understanding human nature, understanding how to deal with an angry customer is essential for a great performance in your team or in your organization. The main objective of organizational behavior is to enhance well-being in the workplace. We go back to the idea we said at the beginning. We go back to Wegmans, to Google. They understand that very well. They understand that by increasing employee well-being, employees are going to perform better. So therefore, it's extremely important. And organizational behavior, understanding the factors that lead to behavior and understanding how to change those factors is essential for well-being. I mean, nowadays, the line between work and life has eroded. And understanding that and managing that line very well is essential. Google is famous for managing this line between work and life very well. They understand that people who work in Google, they have needs. They need to do their laundry. They need to go back home to take care of their dogs. They want to eat well. So they understand that by providing all these services that they do, apparently they give access to laundry in the workplace, or I think sometimes you are even allowed to bring your dog. They give you great food. At the end of the day, they are managing this. They're making sure that your life is actually good. It's a good quality life. So that your performance is actually much better. And finally, we have ethical behavior. And understanding this is extremely important. Why some people behave ethically and other people don't? Is it all down to their nature? Is it because some people are evil and some people are good? Can the environment make you behave good or bad? Understanding all this is essential for managers and for companies, because we understand now that when you are unhappy, we've been talking here about happiness, well-being. So individuals who are unhappy are more likely to behave unethically. So there is a really strong, important connection between the two of this. The more unhappy you are, the more likely you are to behave unethically. So again, understanding all this, understanding why people behave ethically or why they don't, will make it easier for you to manage these conflicts in the workplace. So and again, this is all connected to the same idea: well-being, feeling good, happiness. That is the main objective of organizational behavior.